So Nosferatu is the story that I'm going to be talking about today, or the movie that I'm going to be talking about today, but yeah, Nosferatu is a 1922 silent film. According to Google, it's an unauthorized and unofficial adaptation of Bram Stoker's 1897 novel, Dracula. Alright, so the beginning of the movie starts off with a beginning text that reads, Nosferatu, does not this word sound like the call of the death bird at midnight? Take care you never utter it, lest life's pictures fade into pale shadows, and ghostly dreams rise from your heart and feed on your blood. So we're set in AD 1838, and it's a chronicle of the Great Death as the text on the screen shows up. And it's based in Wisburg, Germany, which as far as I know is not a real place, but I think it's based off of a real place, it's just the name has changed. So Thomas Hutter is fixing his collar in the mirror when he hears his wife, Ellen, playing with the kitten. Thomas hurries off to pick some flowers to give to his wife, and he twirls her and presents the flowers. Ellen asks him why he killed the lovely flowers, and we kind of see how delicate she is of a person at this point. Living in Wisburg was also a man named Herr Nock. He was a real estate agent, and the only thing certain of him was that he paid people well. Now we see Nock at his desk, reading a mysterious letter with strange symbols on it. He then begins smiling widely, and his teeth are beyond rotten and crooked, and it's just a horrid sight. Thomas Hutter goes to talk to Herr Nock in his office. Nock tells Hutter that someone named Count Orlok from Transylvania wishes to purchase a lovely home in Wisburg. They look at one another and smile in delight, talking of how they could earn quite a bit of money from this. But then Nock says something strange. He says that it will take effort and sweat and maybe even a little blood. Hutter looks confused but doesn't seem to mind. Nock says Orlok wants a deserted home, so he tells Hutter to offer Orlok the large castle-looking estate just opposite of Hutter's home. Hutter comes home to his wife to tell her that he must journey to the land of thieves and ghosts, to Transylvania, and Ellen is very unhappy about this, she seems distraught, but it doesn't seem to faze Hutter. He starts packing when Ellen embraces him, and he kisses her deeply. They set off, Hutter knowing that his friends, the ship owner Harding, and Harding's sister Annie, will all take care of Ellen. Ellen cries, they kiss more, but eventually Hutter does indeed take a horse and head on his way to Transylvania. Hutter arrives at Carpathian Mountains, towering over him, his horse quite tired at this point. He stops at a local tavern and inn for a break. He asks the barkeep to hurry up because he must go to Count Orlok's castle up the road. Everyone in the room immediately looks at him with eyes of fear and confusion. A man comes over and warns him not to travel, for there's a werewolf amok. So Hutter stays in for the night, anxious by this news, although it doesn't seem too believable to him. Hutter is in his room now at the inn when he sees a book on the nightstand that says on the title page, Of Vampires, Terrible Phantoms, Magic, and the 7 Deadly Sins. The first few pages talk about a creature, a vampire named Nosferatu, a spawn of the demon Belial, who feeds on human blood. Hutter again isn't fazed by such a silly thing, and then goes to sleep. It's morning and Hutter gets up, looking at the book once more. He still thinks it's silly, but he takes it with him, gets ready, and heads out on a horse and carriage. However, the driver of the carriage only brings Hutter to a certain point before he decides to make him walk the rest, due to his own fear. So Hutter does just that and walks until a strange driver of another horse and carriage meets him to pick him up to bring him to Count Orlok's castle. He drops him off and drives away fast. Hutter steps into the castle and the doors shut behind him. He sees an interesting character, a human-shaped figure with sunken black eyes and bushy dark eyebrows, a large sharp nose, a dark cap and coat, and bony hands with long fingernails and sickly white skin. He's also quite tall, taller than Hutter. This, as Hutter finds out, is Count Orlok. We also later come to know that this was indeed the driver that he just saw bring him to the castle. Although it is strange because he drove away, and yet he was in the castle. Orlok is visibly upset that he had to wait so long for Hutter, because now all of his servants are asleep. Orlok escorts Hutter to the dining hall where they'll eat. Hutter eats while Orlok reads a letter and watches him. An alarm clock starts to go off, startling Hutter. Unfortunately, he's cutting into a piece of food with a knife at the same time, so he suddenly breaks his skin and draws blood on his thumb. Orlok's demeanor changes, and he gets up quickly to go over to Hutter. He quickly grabs his cut thumb and says, "Your precious blood!" Hutter pulls away violently and backs away, terrified. Orlok convinces him to calm down and sit once more. Orlok and Hutter sit in those chairs all night long until morning comes. Hutter falls asleep, and when he awakes, Orlok is gone, sleeping away during the daytime. Hutter looks in the mirror to find two small holes in his skin, pretty close to one another, on his chest near his neck area. He doesn't seem to think anything of it, however. Hutter eats his breakfast and heads out. Hutter writes a letter to his dearest Ellen, and he tells her that the mosquitoes are a nuisance and that he's already gotten bit from them on his neck area, close in proximity and one beside the other. Hutter attempts to show Orlok the contracts of his new home when Hutter accidentally drops his picture of his wife on the table. Orlok picks it up and analyzes it, almost admiring it. He says, "Your wife has a lovely neck." Orlok says he'll take the house and then signs the contracts, but Hutter is visibly shook. Later, Hutter is in his room reading another one of those strange books about a creature named Nosferatu, and it says to beware because it will sneak in and suck your blood at night. Hutter at this point is already suspicious, but he is clearly not suspicious enough to leave the castle. Hutter peeks outside of his room when an alarm goes off again, and he sees Count Orlok standing there staring at him already. The door opens by itself when Hutter steps away from it, and Orlok slowly steps inside. But then we cut to Ellen in her home back in Wisburg, Germany. She wakes in the night and goes to her balcony, and she tiptoes her way across the railing of the balcony like a ballerina, as though in some sort of trance-like state. Harding comes and catches her as she falls back onto the balcony, bringing her back to bed. She awakes in a panic and throws her arms out, knowing in her heart that something is wrong with Hutter, because in that moment, Orlok is standing over Hutter in his castle. But Orlok stops. He stops and he leaves the room, and Ellen calms down. Morning comes and Hutter wakes to find a cellar with a coffin in it. He looks inside and sees Count Orlok, eyes wide open, lying dormant in there, like a mummy. Hutter runs away in terror to his room, unsure what to do now. As evening comes, Hutter watches from his window while Count Orlok, which we all know is Nosferatu at this point, but Count Orlok puts a bunch of coffins on a horse-drawn wagon and then steps into the last one he puts up there, magically sealing himself in with the powers of telekinesis. Hutter just knows Nosferatu is off to steal away with his wife. He just knows it. So he hurriedly packs his things and creates a rope made of bed sheets and clothing to scale out his window and down the side of the castle to leave. Side note, I don't know why he didn't just go through the front door, since Nosferatu wasn't even there anymore. Hutter falls from a decent height at the last few inches of rope and passes out. As we see a raft of two men who are transporting cargo, the coffins, down a river to Wisburg, Germany, Hutter is in the hospital, being transported there by a passerby. He wakes with a panic and embraces the nurse, scared for his life, and probably his wife's life. Nosferatu and his coffins were transported onto a ship to make it to Wisburg, whose crewmates were a little suspicious, so they opened up a coffin which was filled with dirt, and then dumped it out to find it was filled, also, with rats. Now, during this time, a man named Professor Bulmer, a Paracelsian, was initiating his students into the habits of carnivorous plants. We see a Venus flytrap swallow up a fly, very briefly, and Bulmer says, "Like a vampire, is it not?" Side note, this may seem a little out of place for the movie, this scene with Professor Bulmer, but I'd say it has to do with the fact that he's comparing nature to a vampire. And I think that's very important for this film. Meanwhile, knowing that Count Orlok would arrive soon, Herr Nocht, the real estate agent, hides within the shadows. He's admitted into a psychiatric hospital, although they don't say why he is. He starts screaming that blood is life, while swatting bugs in the air. He then attempts to attack the doctor in the room, but the police officer there stops him quickly. This is where it gets really chaotic. Like, the entire movie goes from cutting to this person to this person to this person, and I just want you to know, I'm just following along with the movie, so please just hear me out because it's gonna get a little confusing. Annie gets a letter from Hutter addressed to Ellen, who's pining for him at the beach, so she brings it and reads it to her. Ellen is distraught by this letter at the sound of the mosquito bites on Hutter's neck, and she takes the letter and runs off. Hutter decides to leave the hospital as quickly as possible, so he heads home to Ellen on his horse. At the same time, we see short scenes of the ship Nosferatu is on, still sailing across the ocean to Wisburg, Germany. Herr Nock in the hospital gets news of a plague going around Transylvania, some other parts, and even on ships in the Black Sea. This makes Nock extremely happy as he cheers to himself. Now, on the ship with Nosferatu, a crewmate tells the captain that one of them below deck has fallen quite ill. The illness, or the plague, spreads like an epidemic throughout the ship. The captain and his last crewmate toss the corpse of their last friend into the ocean depths, and one of them decides to go below deck, where all of the coffins are, with an axe. He tears open one coffin, and hundreds of rats scurry out. Then, in a single motion, Nosferatu springs out of his coffin like a mummy rising. The man decides he won't take it anymore and jumps right off the ship. Nosferatu then goes up the stairs onto the deck and kills the captain of the ship. Ellen, Hutter's wife, is awake in the night once more. She is seemingly back in another trance-like state, spreading her arms out as though to touch something on her balcony that isn't there. Annie, Harding's sister, gets up after hearing a noise and attempts to bring Ellen back inside. But Ellen says, "He is coming. I must go to him." Ellen hurries out of the house and down the street. Meanwhile, Nock is in the hospital, putting a chair up to his bed to see out the barred window. He senses that his master is near, and he gets down and waits. Nosferatu's ship docks in Wisburg, Germany's pier at the same time. A police officer comes into Nock's room, and Nock attacks him with all of his might, defeating him. Here's something that I missed the first time I saw this movie, and it's that Nosferatu is likely to have brought coffins of dirt and rats with him, because vampires can only draw their shadowy strength from the cursed earth they were buried in. So that makes a lot more sense for why he would bring them onto the ship with him. Nosferatu scurries across the street in the night with the dirt-filled coffin on his arm. At the same time, Ellen and Hutter are reunited at their home with deep kisses of passion and love. Nosferatu hurries across their front lawn and takes a boat across the lake to his new estate, still with his coffin on his arm. Morning comes and the Council of Wisburg are checking out the new ship that's arrived, wondering why it's here and no one has come out. They find that the captain of the ship is dead on board, but no one else is there, just rats with old coffins of dirt. They also find the captain's logs, which state that the first to get sick claimed there was a hidden passenger on board, but no one believed him. They also read that the ship broke out into a plague. At the point of reading the word plague, they tense up and become utterly terrified. The overseer of the group tells everyone to go home and lock their windows and doors. They all then disperse to go do so. A courier alarms everyone in their homes with a drumming and then states that no one is allowed, if sick, to go to the hospital and must stay home. Everyone bolts up their windows and doors. And at this point, a man comes by to mark, I'm assuming, the plague-stricken household's front doors with some white chalk, making the sign of a crucifix. Weirdly enough, Hutter kept the book that warned him of the vampire Nosferatu before from the tavern and inn's nightstand. He warns Ellen not to look through it, but for some reason she's drawn to it. So she looks inside and reads. It says that no other deliverance from this evil is possible but for an innocent maiden to give her blood willingly to the vampire. Annie, Harding's sister, falls ill quickly, I'm assuming to the plague. Meanwhile, Ellen looks out the window and sees at least 6 coffins being carried down the street, of all those who have lost their lives to the plague. The entire town begins to panic as everyone finds out that Nock killed the police officer in his room in the hospital and ran away. I don't know how they found out, but they also realize that he's a vampire. I'm assuming that he sucked the blood out of the officer and they saw the marks on his neck. So everyone goes hunting for him in the middle of a pandemic for some reason, and they see him on a roof and throw rocks at him. And honestly, I have to say the way the rock hits his head and he just smiles away delightfully is just disturbing. He hurries down from the roof and runs about to hide away. In the night, Ellen sees Nosferatu watching her from his window across the way, seeing as he did buy the property that is just across the lake or the river from Ellen and Hutter's home. Nosferatu goes downstairs and out the front door of his building. He sneaks into Ellen and Hutter's home, walking up the stairs as we see his disfigured shadow creeping with his long fingernails. He goes into Ellen's room while Hutter is calling for the doctor, because he knows something is wrong with her. We then see Nosferatu sucking the blood from the neck of Ellen, Hutter's wife. Herr Nock is captured once more, and a rooster sounds to mark the dawn of the morning. Nock knows that his master is about to be in serious trouble, but he cannot warn him because he's imprisoned. Nosferatu steps into the light coming from the window with nowhere to hide, and immediately turns into ashes. At this point, Nock knows that his master is dead. Ellen leans up from her bed and calls out for Thomas Hutter, her husband, and he comes in just in time to catch her as she falls into her final rest. Ellen is now gone. Alright, well, that was quite the ordeal. Well, thanks for watching if you did. And be sure to hit that like button if you enjoyed this video, and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this, because I'm going to be making more, summaries of movies and things like that, but with a drawing twist to it so that it's not just, me reciting what people have already seen in a movie. So that way it's like I'm drawing fan art as well. So thank you for watching again, and I'll see you next time. Bye!